happening there, and we try to, well, by and large, this is under control, and we try to provide for the security of the nuclear power plant and the fuel. But I can only add that the sabotage squads of the Ukrainian army last month and last year repeatedly tried to blow up the power transmission lines near the Kursk and Smolensk nuclear power plants, trying to, well, our professionals restored power supply quickly, but what has been happening now at the Zaporozhye power plant is no different from the activities by those terrorist squads. This is very dangerous. Well, they'd better stop that. I hope this message is brought home to those who are in charge. So Grossi knows what has been happening. Yes, he does, and he knows that. Like a UAV drops a shell, or a shell comes. So do we strike ourselves from the Ukrainian territory? This is ridiculous.
Gabor Stirtan, over to you. Thank you so much, Mr. Putin. Thank you for sharing with us your Russian view and your personal view about the world, about the future world order and the current world order. I'm from Hungary, from the country that today very often is being said a black sheep of Europe. The last several days, at the Valdai Discussion Club, we were addressing many questions as to what is going on in the world. We discussed it whether the West is prepared for such a rearrangement or restructuring, and what place it can take in the nascent world order. And by the way, we were speaking about the deplorable state of the European Union, or Europe. I think, and many in Hungary share that point of view, and they ask what would happen to the European Union, because it is not clear whether the EU would stay, would remain, or will it collapse. Its future is not clear. Many believe that the last nails into the coffin of the EU would be driven by the integration of Ukraine. What do you think? Do you share that point of view that the EU now is in deep crisis? What is your attitude towards that situation? And speaking about whether Ukraine is going to accede to the European Union, recently you said that Russia is not against that. Many do not understand that. I understand that once Ukraine is accepted as a member of the EU, then the EU would become weaker, and a weak EU is beneficial for many. But if Europe is too weak, it would pose a risk, it would pose a threat for the Eurasian space. Second, the EU lately looks very much like NATO. If we look at how we treat the Ukrainian crisis, it becomes very clear. My point is that so the European Union fist in that fight would be Ukraine, it would be its ram, and once it becomes the member of the European Union, it would threaten Russia. What is your take on that?
Well, first of all, the European Union originally, since the founders, and the Commonwealth of coal and steel developed as an economic group. I said publicly already, but I will indulge in recalling once again that in 1993, together with the then mayor of St. Petersburg, Mr. Sobchak, I accompanied him, and he had a meeting with the then Chancellor, Federal Chancellor Kohl. And Kohl said if Europe wanted to preserve itself as one of the standalone centers of global civilization, it should act in concert with Europe, and Russia and the EU would be mutually complementary in a most powerful way. Well, actually, we actually both built on the traditional values, and back then they were respected in Europe. They held in high esteem in Europe, and with respect to today, just it's my general assessment. I have already made myself clear, and I have recalled Pushkin. Well, anyway, this is a very powerful group or alliance with huge potential and with a huge capability, but it has been ebbing away and abating at the same time. It's not that the main powerhouse of Europe, Germany, has been stagnating for a number of years, and it's projected that they will keep stagnating next year. It's not that the French economy has been faced with a great deal of challenges and fiscal deficits and the growing debt burden, but rather it's about the fact that them fundamental things that have to do with the European identity are fizzling out. This is the erosion from within. The uncontrolled migration flows erode them. You know better than me. Europe, whether Europe should be a union of nations or a quasi-state, it's none of our business. It's up to the Europeans to decide, but one way or another, they should have the underpinning values in place. If they disappear, Europe, that we love dearly, also would disappear. We have very many liberal people from the creative and intellectual communities, and these are the West lovers and advocates, and they believe that we should tilt towards the West. But even they have been telling me in private that the Europe that we cherished and loved dearly is gone. I will not call their names. They're very well-known people in this country. These are European intellectuals in the full sense of the word, and they stay half a year in Europe, in a year, and the Europe that we loved and cherished is gone, they say. So this is because of the erosion of the underpinning values. If that keeps happening, well, Europe will gradually shrink and shrivel and lose its power, and the erosion of the foundation of values will give rise to the economic problems. If things go as they proceed, their sovereignty, values-based sovereignty, will be gone, will be lost, and the economic challenges crop up. We've just discussed that uranium, which is a type of energy. You may supply that to the United States, but you can't supply gas and oil to Europe. Why so? No, you can't. Because they have their own considerations. What kind of considerations? Unless they focus on their national interests, they can come up with dozens of arguments. But if they're guided by their own national interests and remain sovereign, they have no grounds. And once the sovereignty is lost, everything will collapse like a house of cards. Currently, some political forces are gaining momentum in Europe that cater to the national interests in France and Germany and Hungary, headed by Viktor Orban, who has been at helm for quite long. So I haven't been following their domestic political developments, but I'll bet the majority of the Hungarians want to remain Hungarians and will support Orban. Otherwise, they'll support von der Leyen if they don't want to remain Hungarians. So, if the forces that I've mentioned in Europe have been gathering pace, Europe will be revived, but that depends not on us but on Europe. Mr. President, you know, these days, off the shores of France, an oil-filling tanker was seized. They have demonstrated their sovereignty. So sooner or later, that is related to Russia, although the flag is different. This is piracy, filibusterism. Well, the tanker has been seized in neutral waters without any grounds. Probably they were seeking some military cargoes like the UAVs or other items. It had none and couldn't have had. And the tanker sailed under a third country flag, and there was an international crew. I'm not sure whether that was related to Russia, but you know, this fact has happened. And what is that, and is that important for France? Well, it is, depending. Well, given the very, very difficult domestic political situation, and the French political leadership can, in no other way, distract the attention of the people from the challenges that are hard to resolve inside the republic. So this is why they want to pass the buck and move the focus to the borderline and egg on different countries like Russia and provoke us so that we act actively and tell the French people, join me and close ranks around me. I'll lead you to victory like Napoleon. But actually, this is the gist of it.
I believe you've been too kind towards the President of France. You know, I do it gladly. We have strictly working relationship, but what is happening right now is exactly as I've told you. I have no doubt. I know him well.
Van Charlie. From the Center of Russian Studies in Shanghai. Mr. President, I'm really glad to see you once again. I totally agree with you, with your point of view. We need to get back to classical diplomatic approaches. It's time. But in recent month and a half, you successfully finished two important official visits. First of all, Russian-American summit in Alaska, and the second one was with the SCO and then the military parade in Beijing. So let me ask you this. What are the specific results of those summits? And what's the importance of those visits? Is there any connections there? Are there any results that would help us to improve the international situation? Thank you.
First of all, you've started with a visit to the United States, to Alaska. We haven't discussed with Mr. Trump of any kind of bilateral matters. We've only spoken about the means and ways of resolving the Ukrainian crisis. I believe overall it's a great result, and the President Trump, we've known each other for a long time. And of course he likes to speak, and everyone sees it. But it's also the kind of person who can truly listen, who can hear what you're saying. He responds to what you're saying. So he's quite a comfortable person to speak to. And us attempting to search and find possible ways of resolving the Ukrainian crisis is quite significant. And that was the first point. The second point, even though we've just breached it attemptively, it's the U.S. and Russian relations that are not at a dead end, but it's at quite an early stage. And the very fact of our meeting, of this visit, and I'm very grateful to the President for organizing it, I believe it's all signs that lead to the restoration of bilateral relations, and that is great for us in the bilateral scope, but for the international community as a whole. And now approaching my visit to China, when we've spoken with my friend, I believe that the President of China is my dear friend. We have established very friendly, trustworthy relations. He told me that himself, that we in China, and he didn't say that for the whole world to hear, he said that to me personally, that we welcome the reestablishment and restoration of U.S.-Russian relations, and we will try to assist it in any way possible. But of course my visit to the Chinese People's Republic was wider in a scope, because together we've celebrated the end of the Second World War. The result of this joint fight of Russia and China. Russia, first of all, on the track of combating Nazism, and then, of course, together combating the Japanese militarism, have contributed significantly. I've already mentioned it. Just look at the colossal sacrifices that Russia and China have made to the altar of this victory. And secondly, of course, on our side, as well as from China when he came to celebrate the 9th of May, we stay true to this spirit of allyship. So I believe, in this sense, the visit to China was of global, fundamental nature. And of course this allowed us, on the sidelines of these events, to discuss the world situation, to compare our points of view on the development of bilateral relations in the humanitarian, cultural, educational areas. For next year and forward, we've decided to announce the years of education. And that speaks for the fact that we want to work. We work, and we will continue to work with the youth. This is the future outlook. That is why this visit was so important. And some initiatives of the Chinese president on the global governance, they align with our ideas of Eurasian security, to compare our notes because this was truly of global nature, not just bilateral nature. So I highly assess the results of that visit. And I believe this was another important step forward in the development of our relations.
Mr. President, you are the first leader in the world who called Trump a comfortable person to talk to.
You see, I speak from the heart. As I've already mentioned, of course he likes using big words and speaking point blank and just directly tackling the issue. But he's, as I've already mentioned, protecting his national interests as he sees fit. But sometimes it's easier to hear a direct approach, to understand, instead of ambiguous phrasings. And I'm not saying it just to pay a compliment. We've talked for an hour and a half. I've presented my position and he listened attentively. He did not interrupt me. Then I listened to him very closely. We've exchanged our opinions. These are very complex issues. I will not go into detail because we don't do that. But he said that this will be complicated. Yes, of course. Obviously. We started to go into certain details. We have discussed them. There was a discussion. There was a discussion. I believe you should do this, you should do that, take off your hat. No. There was none of that. Of course, it is important that this leads to a logical conclusion, that there are definite results, but it is a complicated process. And I say that constantly, that it's important to reach a balance of interests, to reach a consensus. It is difficult. But if we approach this, and if we reach those results during the discussion, then these are truly tremendous agreements, and we can hope that they're long-lasting.
Did you tell him anything about the history of Ukraine?
No, that's not funny. I've spoken about this with my other American colleagues. We've truly discussed of possible ways of resolution. We've been quite frank. We've spoken honestly. It's hard to predict what will come out of it. But we will continue. We're ready to continue this discussion.
Whose idea was it to meet in Alaska?
Does it really matter? The important thing is that we did meet. But we were comfortable in Alaska. You see, they still have Orthodox presence there. They have Orthodox churches. People come to services, and the services are delivered in English. And for certain commemorative events, once that English service is over, the father, just addressing the Russian community, says the word, "I congratulate you," in Russian, and everyone responds in Russian as well. It's a true testament.
Mr. President, you mentioned economic sanctions against Russia. There is an unprecedented number of them. You just spoke about Orthodox churches and our patriarch, Cyril. Also, there were sanctions imposed against him. Our economy survived. It showed that it was quite resistant as it comes to sanctions, and our friends and our opponents were surprised at the resilience of our economy. We'll have to live with sanctions for decades, if not more. How would you assess their impact on our economy, and what do we need to do to make sure our economy is resilient in the long run?
It's true, I've mentioned it in my address. That our path hasn't been an easy way It has been a responsible one. We've tried to raise the level of our independence and sovereignty, of economic sovereignty, financial sovereignty. What have we done? First of all, we have significantly changed our main trade partners. We have reshaped the logistics of work with our partners. We have changed the payment system. And all of this is functioning. But in today's world, it's not enough. We have to pay more attention to solving other issues, and first and foremost is the further diversification of our economy. It has to be modernized. It has to use more high technology. We have to restructurize the work market, how to pay all of these workers. We have to use more high technology. We have to raise the effectiveness of that work. And it means that higher salaries paid to higher qualified personnel. But we also have paid more attention to those who earn less, because people who earn less, who earn more, they spend more money on domestic products, which means the growth for our local markets. Of course, we can reinforce our financial system. And here it's important to achieve two results. First of all, we need to continue reinforcing our macroeconomic stability, lowering the inflation. But at the same time, we need to preserve the positive speed of economic growth. We've achieved 4.3%, which is much larger than international figures. But at the end of last year, we've said that in order to defeat the inflation, we have to unfortunately sacrifice the record-setting growth rate, which is why the central bank lowered the key rate, which affects the economy. We will conduct the events that have to do with the forced freezing of the economy, but we will sacrifice this growth in order to restore the macroeconomic figures so that the economy stays healthy as a whole. So there are a lot of government-made decisions about the taxation, about the added value, and it's important not to allow for the shade economy to take over. So these are the key goals in short term. Those are just fundamental points. As for our economy, our relatively small external debt and relatively low budget deficit. This year it was 2.6. Next year we plan for 1.6. At the same time, the debt load is, the state debt is lower than 20%, which allows us to assume that even if the added value will raise, which of course will affect the economic growth, and we understand that because all the taxation affects the economy, but this will also allow us to find a better balance for the central bank when it comes to dealing with economic issues with key rate, but also for the government when it comes to expenditure budget, when they set their own parameters, creating conditions for further development. So all of this in complex allows us, first of all, to assume that we have come a long and winding road, but at the same time gives us reassurance that not only have we passed this stage, but we have enough reason and enough means to continue moving forward.
Alexander Kuich. Mr. President, my name is Alexander Akovic. I'm a historian from Serbia, Belgrade. And my question is as follows. What do you think about the attempts to stage colored revolution in Serbia?
I agree with President Vučić, but our secret services confirm that certain Western centers take attempts to organize these color revolution in Serbia. You see, there are always people, especially young people, who don't understand much about current issues, who don't know enough of history of these issues and the consequences that the illegitimate forms of shift of power lead to, especially the color revolution. What did the color revolution in Ukraine lead to? I believe everyone understands that. These revolutions are unconstitutional, illegitimate seizure of power, to speak frankly. Usually it doesn't lead to anything good. Usually it's easier to stay true to the law, to the Constitution. As for the effect on the youth, it's usually the easiest ways to affect the minds of the youth, which is why I've spoken about our young girls and young guys who use the Russian symbols when they wear them in public, when they're carrying that with pride. This is the basis of the self-identity and the protection from the external pressure. And the youth in Serbia, even those who go outside, they're patriots at their core. And it's important to continue dialogue with them. They should never forget how much suffering the Serbian people have gone through before the First World War, during the First World War, after that, ahead of the Second and during the Second World War. The Serbian people have suffered a lot, and those who push the youth on the streets want their people to continue suffering, just as they want the Russian people to suffer, and they're speaking openly about it. Perhaps they're not being open about it in Serbia, but that's probably what they're thinking. So all these messages that you will go forward, you will dethrone someone, and they say that everything will be okay. Nobody ever says what kind of okay that is. How will it be? What the price for that will be? They stay silent about those things. And usually it leads to the reversed result, to the exact opposite of what people expect. But I believe if you conduct a proper dialogue with these young people, you can find common ground with them. Because first and foremost, they're patriots, and they should understand what's better for their country. All these revolutionary changes, or gradual changes with their participation. But that's not our matter. That is the internal affair of Serbia.
Do you have good relationship with President Vučić now? There are some complaints about Serbian colleagues.
I have good relations with everyone, and with Mr. Vučić as well.
Здравствуйте, Владимир Владимирович. Меня зовут Адиль Калкин.
Mr. Putin, my name is Adil Kilkenov. I'm a doctoral student of the Beijing University of Language and Culture. Let me go back to your visit to China. There's this big news now that China introduced a visa-free regime for the Russian citizens, and you can see that in Beijing. How do you assess this measure? Is Russia ready for the reciprocal measure for Chinese citizens to come to Russia?
As for our responsive steps, I've already mentioned this in Beijing. We will mirror these steps. Just recently, I've spoken with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, who said, we've already done it. No, just let me check back on that. So you see, bureaucracy works the same way in every country. So if we haven't done it yet, we will be sure to do it. The announcement on the visa-free entry of Russian citizens into the territory of the Chinese People's Republic was unexpected. It was the initiative of the Chinese president. As for the consequences, I believe they will be nothing but positive, because the basis of interstate relations is created first and foremost on the human level, and the number of people who will visit China with different purposes, for tourism purposes, for scientific research, for educational purposes, will far exceed that we're witnessing today. And of course the same will be in return. First of all, it will apply to tourists who will take a look at Chinese life, and vice versa, Chinese tourists who will get acquainted with life in Russia. I believe these are things of fundamental value. We always welcome them, and we will continue to assist on that track.
General Sharma, over here, please.
Mr. President, we are keenly looking forward to your visit to India in December. And my question is, what would be the strategic focus of your visit to India? How will it result into deepening the bilateral relations and also collaboration regionally and internationally?
Our relations with India are of special nature ever since the Soviet Union, and since the days where the Indian people fought for their independence. India knows, remembers, appreciates that. And we appreciate the fact that India never forgets that. And so our relations are developing. I believe we will celebrate 15 years since our announcement of the specialized, strategic, privileged partnership. And India and Russia never had any issues of interstate nature, any differences. Prime Minister Modi is a very reasonable, wise leader. He's very oriented in the interests of his nation, and everyone in India knows that. So now our priority is to build effective, mutually beneficial trade ties. Trade turnover with India is $63 billion. So 1.5 billion people live in India, and in Belarus there are 10. And with Belarus we have $50 billion and 63 with India. I believe this doesn't align with our potential, with our capabilities. So we have to resolve a number of matters so that we can unblock our full potential. And first and foremost, we have to deal with the logistics. Second of all, we need to deal with the financing, with the payments. And there is room for work, and there are opportunities for that. We can do that within the BRICS instruments on bilateral basis, using rupees, using the third country currencies, using the electronic payment means. These are the things that need to be discussed. We have a trade disbalance with India. We are aware of it. We recognize it. And together with our Indian friends and partners, we're thinking of ways to perfect this train turnover. Just recently, I gave another order to the government, to the co-president of the Intergovernmental Commission, Mr. Manturov, so that together with his colleagues, he could think of the ways to develop these trade and economic ties. And so now the Russian government is working on it and will continue to put forward subsequent steps to our Indian colleagues. As for political relations, our contacts on the international stage, we usually convert our actions, align them, and we always hear our position, the position of our friends, take it into account, and our ministries of foreign affairs are working closely. And the same applies to the humanitarian area. Here in Russia, we have a lot of students. We love Indian cinema. I've already spoken about it. It's probably the only country in the world that, other than India, we have a separate channel that streams Indian movies days and nights. And we also have very trustworthy relations in the security area. Joint production of very modern perspective types of arms, which once again underscores the kind of trust that's been built between our countries. And I also am looking forward to my trip in early December, and I highly await my meeting with my dear friend, with our trustworthy partner, with Prime Minister Modi.
Thank you. Anatol Livin over here.
Craft in Washington. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for coming to see us. Recently, there has been public discussion in the West of two serious potential escalations. The supply of Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine and the potential seizure of ships with Russian cargoes on the high seas, not just in ports and territorial waters. Could you give us your view of the dangers of this and perhaps say something about how Russia would respond? Thank you.
It's dangerous. As for the Tomahawks, it's a powerful arm. Perhaps not the most modernized, but it's powerful. Poses serious threat. This will not change in any way the balance of powers on the battlefield, the fundamental issues of the armed forces of Ukraine, no matter how many UAVs they get, and no matter how many lines they create with those UAVs, without the personnel, there will be no one to lead those battles. They have to change the tactics. Just look at what they're showing on the TV screens about how our troops are moving. 2-3 people, but they're moving. RAP is working, so they'll continue step by step to move forward. Yes, of course there has been damage, but the Russian air defense systems have adjusted, have started striking them down. Can Tomahawks inflict damage? Yes, but we will continue to strike them down. We will continue to perfect our systems. Will this pose damage to our relations? Where we see light at the end of the tunnel, of course. Of course. Using Tomahawks without direct involvement of the US officers is impossible. Which means a brand new stage of escalation, even in the relations between Russia and the US. As for the seizure of ships, that's not good. That's piracy. What do we do with pirates? They have to be destroyed. There is no other way to deal with them. But it doesn't mean that overnight a war will start in the world ocean, but the risk of clash and confrontation will arise. At the example of the French Republic, I believe that is what will happen, that is what's happening. This mudding of waters and this stirring up of the situation and this continuing of rising level of escalation is nothing but an attempt to distract the attention of their citizens from the growing issues inside those countries. And that is what they're attempting to do. They are awaiting a response from our side. It immediately changes the track of political attention. SOS, we're being attacked. Who is attacking us? Russia. Everyone should stand strong together in order to unite against this common enemy. That is their common goal. And the citizens of those countries should be aware that that is the goal. They want to lead them astray, trying to avert them away from protests, especially on the streets. But at the same time, to suppress their civic activity and to stay in power. But the citizens of these countries should understand that this is a high-risk game. They're being pushed on the path of escalation as well as large-scale armed conflicts. I wouldn't do it.
Mr. Putin, you are setting Europe as an example as actually using the external threats for the internal consolidation. But in the United States, quite recently, we saw some high-profile assassination that has been perceived as an internal conflict aimed to polarize the society. Do they need the external threat in order to address that problem? Well, you know, this is a disgusting thing, and moreover, it was done just in the open air, almost a live show, and it was totally disgusting and totally. I'd like to render my condolences to the family of Mr. Kirk and his next of kin, and certainly we sympathize with him. Moreover, he was defending those traditional values, and by the way, the ones that Michael Gloss came to defend with arms in his hands, and he sacrificed his life for that, and he sacrificed his life here in a fight for the traditional values. As a Russian soldier, and Kirk gave his life there in the United States, but fighting for the same values. What is the difference? There is almost no difference. And by the way, the proponents of Kirk in the United States should know that here in Russia we have Americans who are fighting and who are ready to sacrifice their lives for that. But sadly, this is a sign, what has happened, this is a sign of a deep rift in the society, of a chasm in the United States. And there is no need to escalate the situation from outside, because the political leadership of the country tries to set it straight in the domestic policy, and don't want to comment on that. This is not our business, but I think that the United States is going this way, although what you have said and what our colleague raised the question about the new high-precision long-range missiles. This is another way to distract the attention from the domestic problems. But at least what I see, still the United States leadership, the US administration actually is more inclined to pursue a different policy, focusing more on achieving national development goals the way they understand it. Thank you so much. Glenn Dissent.
President Putin, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. My question was about Finland and Sweden having joined NATO. It changes the geopolitical landscape of Europe, and I was wondering how Russia interprets this. That is, the High North, as well as the situation in the Baltic Sea, perhaps specifically on the pressure that Kaliningrad is coming under, and how Russia might respond to this. Thank you.
As for the fleet, I've already mentioned that this could lead to conflict. I would not like to go into details and to give food to those who await our radical discussion. I will say this and that, and then they will start saying that Russia is making threats. We were warning you about this for a long time. And then they will get exactly what they were trying to get, trying to distract the attention from the problems due to the heightened factor of external threat. Of course, we will respond. It's not us who's suspending someone's fleet. Someone is trying to put obstacles on our way. What is the shady fleet? Can anyone speak for what that is exactly? I'm sure that not, because there is no term for that in the international sea law, which means those are unlawful actions, and those who try to do it need to keep that in mind. Secondly, as first for your question, is Sweden and Finland joining NATO? It's nonsense. We had no issues with Sweden or Finland. No issues whatsoever. In Helsinki, you could pay in rubles in any store. People would go into the store and use rubles to pay. In the border regions, they had signs in Russian. They were employing people to work in hotels and shopping malls, people who spoke Russian, because there were a lot of tourists. A lot of our citizens bought houses there. And perhaps some of these countries got a suspicion, or they were afraid that this silent influence of Russia was taking place. But the world is interdependent. If you don't like something and you see any danger in it, take certain economic administrative measures. Just limit acquiring of housing. Anything can be solved. But joining NATO, a bloc that is leading an aggressive policy towards Russia, what for? To safeguard what exactly? To protect whose interests? To protect what interests of Finland exactly? Was Russia trying to capture Finland or Stockholm? All that Russia wanted, we've resolved with Sweden after the Poltava battle. That happened a long time ago. We had no more standing issues. We know that Sweden had a different figure of Charles XII. And perhaps he was killed by his own people because he was trying to involve Turkey in another war with Russia. But that was long ago, centuries ago. What kind of issues did we have with Finland? There were no issues. Everything was resolved. All the agreements were signed following the Second World War. So what was the purpose? Were they trying to benefit from the strategic defeat of Russia? I could show a gesture, but I won't do it in the presence of ladies. Finland and Sweden have lost the advantage of neutral status. These negotiations on the possible resolution of Ukrainian crisis. Helsinki Act, why did it right? Why was it called? Because it used to be a neutral country. It was a comfortable spot for meetup. And now who exactly will go to Helsinki? Mr. Stu. Donald has that. He's good at golf. Okay, that's nice, but it's not enough. And I don't want to say anything bad. I love sports myself, but it's not enough. Where is the perspective? What is the advantage? Just name one thing. Perhaps the nationalist part of Finland was afraid that Russia was trying to silently intervene, but just introduce some administrative measures. Why not do it? I've always had good friendly relations with former leaders. They've come here, we've discussed any kind of issues, the transport movement. It was comfortable. But you see, apparently Russia is conducting aggressive politics. It attacked Ukraine. How about the fact that a coup d'etat took place in Ukraine? Did you not take that into account? What about since 2014 they've been killing children in Donbass? Is that okay? That tanks and airplanes were used against the civilians in those cities. Everything was documented. Is that acceptable? They just didn't want to analyze that. All they wanted to do was join the clique that wants to profit off of Russia's sake. Former president, when we spoke on the phone, we had friendly relations, we played hockey together numerous times. He said, Norway's in NATO and nothing is happening to them. Well, yes, nothing good is happening to them. We've negotiated with them on the sea matters, normal relations, but now the border between Russia and NATO is growing bigger. We had no armed forces in that part of Russia, but now there will be. Now we have to create separate military areas. Finland said we will not allow the emergence of arms that is dangerous to Russia, especially nuclear arms. Who the hell knows? Who exactly will ask the Finns for their opinion when making those decisions? I don't want to offend anyone, but I know how those decisions is made. Just leave it be, and what will this lead? Did you hit the hole? Now you will respond for that. So let's station the complexes over there. They will be responsible for this and that. What is the point? Now they're mentioning our aircrafts not using transponder over the Baltic Sea. I have noticed when I visited Helsinki that NATO airplanes never used transponders. And then the Finnish president said, well, let's agree that everyone should use them. Russia agrees. What was the NATO country's response? We will not abide by those rules. This is nothing but the stirring up over another region in the world. And they're threatening the very stability, the military strategic stability in those regions. If there's anything dangerous then we will also station something dangerous there. But what for? Who exactly will benefit from it? Will Finnish security or Swedish security benefit from it? Not at all. So, of course, we will continue working. If they want to restore relations, we have no objections. But the situation has changed. There is a residue.
Mr. Putin, why are you sending so many drones to Denmark? Don't do that.
I promise I won't do it anymore. Not to Denmark, not to France, not to Copenhagen. Where else are they flying? Lisbon. People are entertaining themselves, and they used to entertain themselves about the UAV, about the unidentified flying vehicles, about the UVFs. And they have a lot of weirdos. We can watch them every day and they can try and catch them. But if we speak seriously, we don't have UAVs that could reach Lisbon. We have long-range ones. But there are no targets there. That's what matters. But that is another way of stirring out the situation in order to respond to the orders of Washington and to raise their expenditures on defense. Although the European economy their situation is complicated. We've spoken about Germany, France. Germany used to be at the forefront of the European economy. And no matter how badly they want it, they can never regain those positions. In short term, it's very complicated, and other countries are losing their positions due to the stagnation of leading economies, due to the high budget deficit, and other macroeconomic figures. I believe I said that we had 2.6. Theirs is 4 or 6 times. So in order to distract the attention from these substantive, deep issues, they try to stir up waters.
I think that you have scared Portugal, Lisbon, and actually the situation there is very dire. Well, it was a joke. By the way, it was a joke.
No, that was not a joke.
Then you are warned. That's a very frank thing to do.
If you're warned, you can consider yourself armed. Allow me, let's be democratic. There is a lady over there in a light blouse, please.
Mr. Putin, a few words about the aggression and the global majority. Several times you remembered how BRICS was set up and what is going on there, and what BRICS is trying to achieve. And yet, we hear from our Western colleagues, experts, that BRICS, this is a very aggressive entity. Although we and every country individually, we keep saying that our agenda is positive. And we prove to the opposite by all our actions. But nevertheless, still Kazan has been remembered. And this shows actually that our European colleagues are isolated while speaking that this is Russia which is isolated. There are lots of initiatives. I'd like to thank you for your personal support. Last year we launched the Council of BRICS, and that was a great endeavor. How to make sure that BRICS doesn't lose the momentum, that it increases in the size, and we have many more partners joining BRICS. How to make sure that BRICS justifies the hopes of the global majority. Thank you so much.
That's a rhetorical question. BRICS is expanding and it's good, but we also see new challenges, and you've rightfully drawn attention to it, because the more members there are, the more interests and opinions there are to be taken into account in order to agree on a common position. It becomes more and more difficult, but there is no other way. There is only one way: trying to come to an agreement, taking into account all the interests, and the joint work in that direction. And overall, we've been successful, but BRICS is facing a lot of challenges, a lot of tasks. One of them is to perfect, as we believe, not just create a common platform, common principles of cooperation, first and foremost in the area of economics. I've already mentioned that even when addressing the Valdai Club, we're not trying to build our politics against someone. The whole BRICS politics is aimed at ourselves, at the BRICS members. We're not trying to lead an anti-dollar campaign. Not at all. We're just not being allowed to pay in dollars. So what do we have to do? What else do we have to do? We're going to do what other countries are trying to do, including the US. Trying to allow for an expansion of electronic commerce, electronic payments. We will continue to develop within BRICS, and we continue to do it already. We try to push forward the idea of new investment platforms, where I believe we can expect success on that track. Because as I've mentioned, if we use modern technologies in the payment systems, we can create very unique system that would operate with minimal risks and with practically no inflation. So we can plan the projects that would be mutually beneficial for all the members of the process. But first and foremost, to those where these projects are implemented, and first and foremost, we would like to do it on the fast-growing markets of Africa, South Asia, and they will grow very fast. And their growth rates are already fast, and they will only pick up the pace as of today. If we look at the world GDP, BRICS represents 40% of the world GDP. As for the European Union countries, I can only say that it's 23%, and the US is 20%. And that pace is picking up. So the G7 countries 7 years ago and right now, and this tendency continues. And what do we want to do? We want to join this track of development, and together with the major BRICS countries to work on these markets. In Africa, I believe great future awaits them as well. So countries that count 100 million people and more, very rich, South Asia, Southeastern Asia, there are great perspectives of development for humanity. And their countries will strive for the general level of life of these citizens continues to grow, trying to reach that of the states where it's already high today. So it's inevitably going to be a fight to achieve these results. And we want to join this joint positive work. So what about it is aggressive? I believe it's just a stress-induced reaction to our success, as well as a reaction to the further growth of competitors in the world economic affairs. Please, over there, this Mr. raised his hand. Please.
for that very comprehensive presentation, and I think you have answered many of our questions and also cleared doubts. And listening these things from you directly is very, very useful to us, and I want to thank Valdai for giving us this opportunity. You mentioned about your forthcoming visit to India, and you also mentioned some projects and some initiatives that might be taken. But I want to refer to one area, and which is the possibilities of cooperation in high technology, emerging technologies. I believe that there is a need for some special focus and special initiatives to enhance our cooperation, deepen our cooperation in artificial intelligence, cyber, and other areas. So would you be thinking of some special steps, like, for instance, setting up a India-Russia technology fund to promote such cooperation? Because unless there is a impetus at the highest levels, these cooperation will take some time. So that is my first question. My second question is that you have also today also spoken about civilization and culture and its importance. In earlier meetings also here you have emphasized this. If you could kindly elaborate, what is the role of civilization and culture in contemporary international politics? Do you see civilizations as bringing cooperation among civilizations possible and bringing stability? Or do you see there are possibilities of clash of civilizations also, as has been predicted by some other scholars some years ago? Thank you very much.
What a complicated question. Allow me to start off with the easier part, with artificial intelligence and other modern developments of our civilization, and on the possibility of creating a fund. Yes, it is possible. I've already said that I've asked the Russian government and the Vice Prime Minister to think of a proposal to our Indian friends and colleagues as for where we see the most prospective areas of cooperation, how we could fix that disbalance in trade. We could acquire more agriculture products, medical products, and more could be done on our side. As for the fund and our cooperation with Indian friends, there are certain specifications which stem from the fact that the Indian economy is the private economy, and it's developing on the basis of private initiatives. And more often you have to deal not with the state, but directly with the companies. And the state, just like over here, simply regulates these relations. Of course, we need to try on the state level to create conditions for the positive development of relations between the participants of this economic activity, while also working with companies. But the idea in itself is a good one in order to join efforts in the key areas of development, including in the area of developing and using artificial intelligence. We have certain workings that we can pride ourselves for. We have companies that are showing great results. And here, joining our efforts is especially important and is looking very promising. Thank you so much for the idea. So, the kind of task that I've set for the government, I will also readjust it a little bit. As for the civilization, the clash of civilizations. As for the ideas of certain specialists towards that, overall, I know of them. I believe that there is an American research specialist who specializes in the issues of the future civilizations that ideological differences take a step back, and instead, to the surface, there are substantial, fundamental bases of the civilization. And the contradictions that used to exist between the states on the ideological basis, they could now be of civilizational nature. So it's no longer a clash of ideology or a clash of states on the ideological basis, but a clash and confrontation of states due to the civilizational specifications. If you can read, you take a look at it, you read what's been written, there is a certain point to it, but recently I also try to analyze what I've read. So allow me to share my thoughts on the matter. In my opinion, these ideological positions that in the former decades were at the forefront, it was a veil. It was a veil for the clash of geopolitical interests. And geopolitical interests is a thing of more depth, and they're closer to civilization. The Soviet Union collapsed, and the Russian short-witted former servicemen of the Soviet Union that now we're one family, civilized family. We will hug each other, we'll kiss each other on the lips despite following traditional values, and we will move forward as one joined family to live in great family relations. Nope. Even for me, for the former employee of the intelligence services of the Soviet Union, when I headed the federal services, our partners, as I used to say, support separatism, support terrorists and Al-Qaeda in Northern Caucasus. And when I told them, "What are you doing? Have you gone mad?" This is all our people. Give us a large barrel of honey and let's just take swings together from it. But no. They were our so-called rivalries. I was the future director, and back in the day, George Bush introduced me to the secret papers in the presence of the CIA director, and he said, "Mr. President, you've taken note of these documents, top secret, please sign here, this is how it works here." Okay, I signed for those documents. So while I was at the head of the federal services, now that the former shackles of ideology have crumbled, what did I see? But the CIA is working over there in the Northern Caucasus and beyond, who have agents even among radicals, supplying them with financial support, supplying political support, giving them arms, transporting them in their helicopters. Even me, as a former employee of the secret services of the Soviet Union, even I who have climbed up so high in the ranks, I was taken aback. That was the geopolitical struggle. They had no care in the world for ideological clashes. But we need to push down the remnants of the Soviet Union, its smallest part, and to do what Dzerzhinsky said, to crack it down in at least 4 parts. And some large world states that plans were harbored towards them, perhaps these plans are still being harbored. So what exactly does that mean? That the ideological opinions, according to these author, don't remember his name, he's quite an intelligent man, but they were nothing but a veil. But at the basis of those clashes are geopolitical or civilizational contradictions. Will there be further clashes? Struggle of interests takes place all the time on the international stage. The issue is whether we can shape our practical work in such a way, and I've already mentioned it, so that we can find consensus between one another, to find the balance of interests. We have great respect for ancient cultures and civilizations, to Indian civilization, Buddhists, the Chinese civilization, the Arab civilization, Russian civilization is not as ancient as the Chinese, Indian, or Arab, but it's also more than 1,000 years old, so we also have our own experience. So the trademark of our culture is that, yes, well, in Indian, Chinese, and Arab world, societies have been formed over the time. But historically, we have a multi-ethnical and multi-confessional. We never had any reservations. We've never had them, as my sisters like to say, when we've gained representatives of new nations, of new religious groups. We've always treated them with great respect. And we've always treated it as part of a whole. The U.S. is a melting pot, receiving representatives of different countries, but they're all immigrants there. They get ripped away from their own soil. Here, it is not like that. All the representatives of different religions and people, they find themselves on the same soil, coexisting for several centuries. And it is a special culture, a special kind of civilization that we have built here. And we've learned to live together, to continue developing together, and to understand the advantage of this joint development. And in this sense, I believe it's a great example to find compromises and trying to establish balance between other civilizations as well. So yes, of course, contradictions may arise, they're inevitable. But if we stand strong and follow the path that Russia followed while trying to form a united nation, then we can always find a way out of any problems.
Oh, so we're working for 3.5 hours. Probably we have to wrap up.
I'm afraid the audience might hate me. We were on this side. Let's move over to this side, please.
I'm from St. Petersburg University. I would have the following question. Some time ago, you made a very important initiative to prolong for 1 year the New START treaty with the United States. And in the West, that initiative is being silenced. And probably I'm overly optimistic, but let us hope that the common sense would prevail and that treaty would be prolonged, would be extended 1 year, and your initiative would be adopted. But what's next? Will there would be an aim to prolong that treaty once again, or this is the last valid treaty and we have to have another treaty in a more complex consideration, bear in mind other poles.
Konstantin, it's hard for me to say what will happen because it not just depends on us. But if the U.S. administration responds to our proposal, what will happen in a year, I can foresee. But what happens beyond that, it's hard to tell. The dialogue is not a simple one. And we know the underlying rocks of it. We have new modernized weapon systems. Just look at Oreshnik. Not Oreshkin, Oreshnik. Just quite recently, we've shown that these types of arms are not strategic. But apparently, certain U.S. experts are saying, no, this is a strategic kind of arms. They need to figure it out because that requires time. We have hypersonic arms, daggers,